Yeah! Time to frog! Yes, yes, yes! Yeah! Yeah! We can do this! Yeah!
So basically what I'm doing is I'm laying in a wash. A wash is just a thin layer of watercolor paint. You're really just trying to get down the basic values. Don't be tempted to put down too dark of a value here. If you do, you can't go back. So the rule of watercolor is you want to work with your lightest values first, and that's what I'm doing right here. You see I'm blocking in with that really light muted blue. I'm using a cobalt blue, and I'm just adding lots of water. Okay. Also, if you noticed, I'm going in there with some flesh tones. You need to make sure that the areas around those areas are dry. So if I put those flesh tones in, or that green in the eye right there, and that blue's still wet, it'll just bleed and you'll get really frustrated. So you kind of need to block in these areas piece by piece, almost like puzzle pieces. And then here you can see I'm going in with an actual darker value. And how do you get a darker value with watercolor? You're just using less water or more pigment. And I'm also, notice my brush size there. I'm using I believe that's a size 0 brush around. I've seen a lot of artists and people kind of getting into it and they're using a big brush, and they get frustrated as well because it doesn't have that point to it, or you can't get into the areas you need to get in. You can also use a brush that's too small. I've seen people try to paint backgrounds or large areas with a tiny little brush. So you really need to experiment around with brushes and pick the right brush that's right for you. Okay, and again, I could not put those dark value lines around the eye if that's wet. You can actually see where it bled a little bit, and I have to let it dry and kind of reapply there. So again, you're starting with those lighter values first, and then you're gradually building up with the darker values. Putting in some little detail area there, and again, a nice size 0 brush is perfect for those kind of details. This is a cartoon character. He has descriptive lines around him, so I'm kind of adding those in. But you don't want to go crazy and put too many lines around everything. Like, you don't want to outline all the teeth, all the eyes, all the hair, and stuff like that. You can. I don't like the look of it. I like to just use thick lines, thin lines, and it kind of leaves some areas with no lines or just implied lines. So that's kind of what you're going to see me do here. And this is a small sketch. It's in a size 8x10 paper. It's not very big, so again, that small size 0 brush works really well for the small size canvas. Now you can see going back in, I've probably painted that black 3 times. So lighter value, you let it dry, yet another value. I think you'll see a third time there too. The nails, I think I go over those twice or 3 times. Usually I'm going over all areas 3 times. They call it, a lot of artists call it passes. They take 1 pass, then they do a 2nd pass, and then a 3rd pass, sometimes even a 4th or a 5th. But usually in this one in particular, it's 3 passes, it's 3 layers, however you want to call it. And again, in patience, you just got to let areas dry before you go and add on top. The paints I'm using here are a Winsor Newton Professional grade, and again, you can use any paints. You can use the Crayola or the Prang, Sargent, the cheap $3 a set ones. I have used those and they work, but they're not light fast. These Winsor Newton Professionals, they're expensive. They range anywhere from $8 to $13 a color, whereas you can get a whole set for that price. But these are light fast, meaning they will last many years without fading. I think a lot of them are 50 years or they're rated for 100 years, depends on the color. But that's what I want when I paint. I don't want to paint something and then it's gone in one Arizona summer. I gave a piece to my grandmother that I did with Crayolas, and she's had it for over 10 years now, and you can barely see it. The sun from the kitchen and the lights have just basically faded the colors to almost nothing. There you can see that thick line weight again, and then some thin lines in there to really kind of add a little more detail and bring out the paws. And again, I love that size 0 round. You'll see me use that a lot, even in my oils. There it goes, kind of adding those details. I rarely do anything with a pen. I used to be really into pens, but now I'm mainly into using these little brushes as to get my lines. And kind of, again, going over the pencil there, just with some thick and thin lines. Kind of finishing it up. I think I'm going to add a few little more details here. And it's patience. If you don't have patience, you're going to be frustrated with watercolors. It is a great medium to build up patience because you have to let things dry. You can see the nose there. Now that it's dry, I'm going back on top, trying to create the planes. There's light coming from the top, and it's hitting the top of that nose. Even though it's a cartoon, you still want it to have some type of form, so it doesn't look flat. Have a little 3D. You can definitely do art that's flat, but this usually attracts the eye a little more because it's got a little more depth to it, a little more form, and you get that by creating planes. So the hand's not flat, as a top, as a side, as a bottom. Same thing with the nose. So that's something that you can work on. And again, how do you get better? You're practicing your practicing all these techniques. Some of the techniques I'll go over in another video, but I'm pluming, which means the paint's wet and you're adding paint into it, kind of spreads around. You're doing wet on wet, and you're adding wet paint to wet paint. A lot of this is dry brush, where the brush is dry. I'm dipping it into the paint so I have more control. And then I'm layering there. You can see I'm just layering on top with that almost a pure pigment there. There's a little bit of water, but that's very close to the cobalt pigment there. And that's my third pass on that blue there. The brush is a rosemary brush. They are a little pricey. I think that brush there was like $7, but I think it's worth it. It's fantastic, and it'll last a long time if you take care of it, clean it out, and it retains its point. And I've got a couple of them as backups, but that one hasn't. It's lasted probably 20 little miniature paintings or sketches, and it's still going. So it's gonna last a long time. So my advice would be buy the nicest brush you can get. If you're not into natural hair, you can get synthetic. So thanks again, have a great one, and keep watching our videos.